My name is Willis Lamb, Field Supervisor of the LRTC Technical Large Animal Rescue Team in northwestern Nevada. We are an all-risks team that covers multiple counties. We respond to between 400 and nearly 600 incidents per year, depending upon conditions. Wildfire and flood evacuations are among the assignments typical of animal rescue teams. The current standard, known as RT-130, mandates annual fire safety refresher training for wildland firefighters and other responders engaged in fireline duties. This would include volunteers allowed to perform within fire operational areas. This video is not intended to be a replacement for the formal RT-130 course that's directed at wildland firefighters. The purpose of this presentation is to cover wildland fire safety and survival elements that apply to teams authorized to work proximate to and within restricted areas in order to evacuate animals. Operational protocols specific to fires and floods are covered in separate videos. Wildland fires, including those that impact neighborhoods and communities populated with small plot livestock owners, present significant hazards to everyone within the impacted area. Their directions and rates of spread are influenced by a number of factors, and fire behavior can change quickly and radically. The purpose of this presentation is to focus responders operating within higher risk zones as to the hazards present, influences on fire behavior, basic survival skills, and sound situational awareness and decision-making skills. Of concern with animal evacuation teams is while most responders have appropriate experience handling the animals, many have little experience assessing wildfire behavior and risks. Therefore, refreshment in these infrequent skills is warranted. The target audience for this presentation includes auxiliary volunteers who may be operating along with LRTC's primary teams, and therefore our procedures and protocols are presented. However, this information should be useful to any organized evacuation teams who may respond as a result of a wildfire. To have a useful discussion about wildfires, we first need to understand some basic terms. Knowing them can be important when being directed within a fire zone or when monitoring fire channels and changes in fire behaviors are being discussed. In viewing this illustration, the area near the point of origin is called the back or heel of the fire. Typically, the fire will move forward due to winds, travel upslope, or be influenced by a combination of the two. The back or heel is where the fire will typically move the slowest into unburned fuels. The right and left flanks are oriented based on the point of origin or heel. The head of the fire is the primary direction that the fire is headed and is typically the fastest moving portion of the fire. Often due to topography or changes in fuel types, fingers may spread out from the main fire. Fingers can be dangerous as they can leave bays or pockets between them and the main fire, contributing to entrapment if a finger turns back toward the main body of the fire. If winds pick up, ember casts can create spot fires ahead of the main fire that can take off and create safety issues of their own. A couple of other terms that are used are green, to describe the unburned fuel around a fire, and black, to describe the burned out portions. Not illustrated here are islands, or areas of green that could either be surrounded by active fire, and that's a dangerous location to be in, or they could have been left unburned when the fire passed through. We should all remember the fire triangle from elementary school science: oxygen, heat, and fuel. With wildland fires, we have to consider a different triangle: topography, weather, and fuel. To understand its relevance, we need to consider a few fundamental elements. Moisture absorbs heat. For every 18 degrees Fahrenheit of temperature increase, the rate of combustion doubles. Fire behavior during a cool morning may be moderate. However, as daytime temperatures rise and vegetation moisture drops, and especially when winds or upslope currents provide more oxygen and preheat fuels in the path of the fire, rapid fire extension can occur. While clearly we never want to be above a progressing fire, we also need to be observant for conditions where burning debris tumbling down from a fire above us could become hazards when working below the fire. Other features to be critically aware of are upslope canyons, draws, or drainages, often referred to as chimneys. Heat will be concentrated in those landforms, and fire behavior can become extreme. Box canyons can also be death traps. Avoid these landforms any time when working in a fire area. It's important to understand how fires are described, both from the standpoint of understanding terms that you might hear, but also when you need to describe conditions that you are observing or being confronted with. A smoldering fire will present with white smoke but no visible open flame. A creeping fire is basically a small, disorganized fire not spreading with any kind of a defined flame front. A running fire has an organized flame front that is clearly headed in one or more directions. Torching and spotting describes a kind of moderately fast leapfrog behavior involving ground vegetation or trees. Crowning is a dangerous condition with a fire front involving tree crowns themselves, often associated with moderate to long-range spotting. Erratic and extreme describes a violent fire where withdrawal from the entire area is warranted. Also recognize that as ambient conditions change, a smoldering or creeping fire can blow up into an erratic and extreme fire, as occurred during the Tamarack fire that we were sent to. Everyone needs to understand and remember the acronym ELSES. These 4 elements can be critical. Someone has to function as a lookout. It's too easy to get fixated on evacuation activities, difficult animals, etc., and then lose track of both time and fire behavior. At a call in one of the counties we cover, deputies at a checkpoint near the heel of a fire were watching the main fire front that was off in the distance. One of our members who had arrived and was waiting for the rest of the team pointed out that part of the fire had backed down and a finger creeping up was about to catch a patrol car on fire. Always have a lookout. Communications are critical. You can't rely on cell phones or digital messaging to clear up confusion because assignments were not clearly understood. We do use CalTopo to monitor the locations of our crews real time, so our group incident controllers can intervene and redirect units if needed. But assignments still need to be clearly understood. It's important for field units to monitor fire traffic for fire behavior and warnings. Our units all have rooftop identification, so aircraft can understand who is working on the ground and can arrange to direct us to exit if the air attack supervisor observes threatening conditions. The importance of escape routes cannot be overstated, especially when in unfamiliar areas and where road signs are not so obvious. It can be critical to memorize the route on the way in and have a map that shows alternative exits. If we don't have local law enforcement escorts, we prefer to have a local person, usually the animal owner, ride shotgun in the lead vehicle to ensure that we won't take a wrong turn and find ourselves jammed in the path of the fire. In reviewing backcountry wildfire incidents, trailers have been overtaken by fires because owners did not recognize that an alternative escape route was warranted. In an example from California, fire control operations were impacted when a horse trailer got stuck trying to turn around on a narrow backcountry road and blocked fire apparatus responding to a portion of the fire that was crossing the road a short distance ahead. If you don't have a clear escape route out of the area, then move to a safety zone. Don't take chances and never block roads or driveways. The critical fallback plan when conditions suddenly deteriorate is to move to a safety zone. Observe your surroundings and notice where you would likely need to take cover. On a windy day, ember casts can start spot fires literally miles from the main fire, and those spot fires can grow rapidly. When such conditions occur, it may be better to move yourselves and your animals to an appropriate safety zone and let the fire pass. Identify a location that is relatively free of risks and where burning would likely be minimal. On multiple occasions over the years, volunteers and evacuations from fires have had to retreat to safety zones. In the Little Valley fire, a brand inspector directed members to open fences and herd animals from threatened pastures to a recently irrigated pasture for safety as there was insufficient time to load and haul them out. This provided a practical safety zone. All the responders and animals were safe. We prefer to use one of our technical large animal rescue vehicles for lookout assignments. As they are former brush rescue engines, they can provide some defensive cover if we and civilians have to retreat to a safety zone. All that said, the overarching priority in all of these events is situational awareness. There are 10 firefighting orders established to keep crews working in fire zones safe. While they don't all apply to evacuations, most of these standards are applicable. You have to know what weather conditions could impact your operations and not be dismissive of forecasts. You have to understand what the fire is doing and the risks that it could pose. Not only do your actions need to account for what the fire is doing, but also what it will likely be doing before your operations are complete. On arrival, do a size-up, take in the big picture, and identify escape routes and any safety zones before getting involved in your operations. Anytime working close to active fire, post a lookout. Understand that a law enforcement escort may not be trained in fire behavior, so make independent observations. To that end, it's often best to confer with law enforcement and/or fire units at the scene and agree on an action plan to maximize coordination and operational safety. Put on your professional helmet. This incident is not your problem. It's basically your mission to help provide a positive outcome. Stay alert. Be the calmest people at the scene. Think rather than react, and act with purpose. Maintain real-time communications with crew members, on-scene supervisors who may be law enforcement, animal control officers, or fire personnel, and any assisting entities who may be law enforcement or fire personnel. And of course, our incident controllers who need to plot mission progress and identify priorities. Provide clear and concise orders and directions. Clarity is especially important in chaotic environments. Crew bosses must maintain control of and account for all subordinate members at all times. While we won't be engaged in aggressive firefighting, understand that such activities could occur nearby and impact the behavior of the animals being removed. We all need to recognize 18 situations that shout, "Watch out!" Our objective is to respond and arrive early to remove animals before the threat approaches. There could be times when the fire has not been fully scouted and sized up. Even if the fire is some distance away, this is a situation that warrants additional vigilance. Operating after dark in an unfamiliar area is risky. Our SOP is to always use an escort familiar with the area or have an owner occupy the team. Not identifying escape routes and safety zones adds risk to an operation, even when some distance from the fire. At minimum, it's good practice to size up every response location, if nothing else, to create good survival habits. It's important to understand local microclimates and weather probabilities. When in an unfamiliar area, maintain peak situational awareness. It's important to have a clear understanding as to what your mission objectives are and how you will accomplish them. It's also important to know what fire control and other activities are taking place and potential hazards such as from dozers working above, impacted power lines, escape routes blocked by fire apparatus, and so forth. Never operate based on vague or unclear instructions. Be particularly careful if communications between members at the scene and back to supervisory personnel are compromised. Notice if a nearby fire line is not sufficiently anchored, as fire behavior could become more unpredictable. While we don't build fire lines, we need to assess our situation anytime an active fire line is below our position. We're not going to attempt a frontal assault on a fire, but if the fire front is approaching, it's time to withdraw. By the nature of our missions, we're going to operate with unburned fuel between us and the fire. Understand the burn characteristics of that fuel, the rate of fire spread, and remain alert. A fire a half mile or more away can close in rapidly given the right fuels and weather conditions. We want to operate well ahead of the fire and often cannot see it. Since operations can take time and conditions can change, it's not a good policy to operate without a lookout or without a reliable contact with someone monitoring fire behavior. It's definitely risky to operate above a fire, but in hill country, a fire above our operations could produce burning rolling materials that could start spot fires. Again, situational awareness is paramount. As afternoon approaches, the air tends to get hotter and drier, influencing fire behavior. It also impacts responder hydration. Hydrate before starting your task to maintain peak performance and mental clarity. Dust devils and afternoon zephyr breezes are indicators that the wind will likely influence fire behavior. Tall clouds produced by convection can be particularly hazardous, as significant downdraft winds can spontaneously occur, potentially producing extremely erratic fire behavior. If you observe frequent spot fires in front of the fire line, it's time to seriously reassess your situation. Also, be critically aware of terrain and fuel types, such as thick brush and trees, that could impact your access to a safety zone if your egress is compromised. Finally, we will sometimes be given an assignment to stage and wait. There's a natural tendency to want to rest. Rest at the formal camp or staging area. If resting in vehicles in a forward position, someone must be posted as a lookout and radio traffic must be monitored. Proper response procedures are important for the orderly integration of resources into an incident. Generally speaking, there are three response types that come into play: peer-to-peer, agency requests to respond to forward locations, and agency requests to report to staging areas. Individual owners may request assistance from friends or response volunteers to relocate their animals, generally well in advance of their being impacted by a fire. These are typically citizens helping citizens and not technically part of a formal incident response. However, if resources from our team become involved, our incident dispatchers need to be aware of any impacts that it may have to our resource availability. We may respond to an agency request to a specific facility or neighborhood. This type of response requires coordination by and accountability to a specific supervisor from that requesting agency so that mission success can be tracked, resources can be redirected if priorities change, and to avoid resources being exposed to unnecessary risks. The ideal response is to a designated staging area where team bosses can be briefed, resources and their capabilities can be more effectively inventoried, and evacuation requests can be more clearly articulated. Also, when responding from staging, the Animal Rescue Group supervisor has the ability to designate the most appropriate resources for various assignments. Responses typically occur in one of three profiles. A single resource might be sent to a minor situation where there is a minimal removal requirement, such as a single animal left behind that is located outside the operational area. However, in most instances, a second transport will be dispatched to increase staffing for loading, and has been the case, we may find additional animals requiring relocation upon our arrival. Also, after sunset, a lookout will likely accompany the response, even when well outside the incident's operational area. The most common response configuration involves a strike team consisting of an ideal complement of 5 stock trailers with a leader and common communications. The strike team leader could also serve as a lookout where appropriate, or designate someone to serve as a lookout if the leader is involved hands-on with the evacuation operation. While strike teams are our customary configurations, we could be broken up into task forces with our resources combined with conventional animal control vehicles in order to evacuate combinations of large and small animals. For significant incidents, LRTC will respond as an ICS Animal Rescue Group. The ARG is a self-contained package that can support a variety of assignments. It typically includes an Animal Rescue Group supervisor, a transport strike team with a leader, an incident support vehicle with multiple communications capabilities including Starlink, in addition to record keeping and rehab capabilities. A lookout with a Type 6 brush rescue vehicle, a panel trailer, and additional specialized resources could respond as an incident may warrant. The purpose of the lookout responding in a Type 6 brush rescue vehicle addresses multiple issues. While unlikely, a Type 6 can help defend escape if conditions suddenly change. More often, the Type 6 would supply emergency stock tanks for relocated animals. Finally, if there is an animal emergency during evacuation, the equipment and supplies carried on these vehicles can address such issues. When responding, we prefer to rendezvous at a designated location, then proceed to the incident as a cohesive team. When such a practice isn't possible, we will meet up at the assigned staging location. If any resources are assigned to missions prior to the entire strike team arriving at staging, at minimum, the strike team leader has to be informed as to which units are committed, where, and for what purposes. We have to know where you are and what you are doing. Also, when responding, do a pre-check of the trailer. Make sure tires are properly inflated. Remove any flammable materials from the trailer floor. And check for paper wasp nests in the ceiling areas. Members responding to emergency incidents must have on hand the minimum complement of personal safety gear, including a proper wildland brush jacket, helmet, eye protection, gloves, full-length cotton pants, proper footwear, a portable radio, and a reflective vest. For operations outside the actual fire zone, reflective vests can be used in lieu of brush jackets. However, some form of distinctive reflective outerwear is warranted in order to easily account for members, as scenes can become chaotic. With respect to responses, the time to hurry up is when getting organized. Once on the road, members need to slow it down, keep clear heads, and watch for hazards when approaching the incident. You will encounter emergency vehicles, panicked motorists, and even fleeing livestock. As frustrating as these delays may be, just remain aware and deliberate in your driving. Remember to leave an indication as to what animals were picked up and where they were taken. We use orange duct tape as it's highly visible. Also fill out your paperwork while at the scene. It only takes a couple of minutes and it creates a necessary record for the movement of the animals. Finally, it's important to follow the principle of work it or leave it. Spending time on useless efforts not only prevents you from moving on to a more practical assignment, but remaining in an area where there is no apparent solution just puts you at risk and could possibly require fire resources to divert from fire control assignments in order to address an avoidable life safety issue. If you can't get the animals out, try moving them to the safest location on the premises. Advise your supervisor as to the conditions and outcome, and place yourself back in service for another assignment. We must evaluate our progress and adjust as necessary. And as always is the case, we can't be heroes if we become compromised or become part of the emergency. Follow established protocols and use sound judgment, and you're more likely to stay safe and be successful. For members of other teams viewing this video, it's not the intent of this presentation to be a substitute for formal wildfire safety training. Contact your local fire agency and schedule annual briefings prior to your fire season and follow the recommendations and best practices that are presented. Specific techniques for evacuations and general trailer safety issues are covered in other videos. And thanks for watching this video. We hope that it has provided some useful material. For more information, please visit lrtcrescue.org.